It's the Real News Network. I'm Sharmini Pires coming to you from Baltimore. In Bonn, Germany, the 23rd Annual Conference of Parties under the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change is taking place this week and next. To discuss the significance of the Bonn talks and to discuss the U.S. presence, or lack thereof, is Thanu Yakupitiyage. She is the U.S. Communications Manager with 350.org. Thanu, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
And also joining us is Avilés-Vázquez from Puerto Rican organization of Barracuda, and she's also a member of the delegation of It Takes Roots. I thank you for joining us as well, Katia.
Thank you.
Thanu, I understand that there are two types of delegations to the Bonn meetings from the U.S. One is a people's delegation, which is very extensive and large and has a large presence in Bonn. And then there is a few official delegates from the U.S. government. Tell us about the atmosphere there and the U.S. presence.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the atmosphere here is one of persistence. This COP, these climate talks are being hosted by Fiji, and so there's a lot of backing from the Pacific Islands. The Pacific Islands are on the extreme front lines of the climate crisis. Many of the islands in the Pacific, including Fiji, the Marshall Islands, Talanoa, Tuvalu, Kiribati, and others, are only 2 to 3 meters above sea level, and so they're experiencing some of the worst floods, some of the worst typhoons and hurricanes, and they're basically losing their islands because of climate change, because of the fossil fuel industry. And so I think that the atmosphere here is one of not actually a focus on the United States, but of how countries need to actually move forward without the US. And so it's actually been extremely nice to be in a space where the US centricity has actually been shifted, and people understand that other countries really need to push forward their ambition. And that's why we're here as the US People's Delegation, to really put forward our people's vision of the United States and the kinds of local action we need to have on the US level in order to continue to move forward with the rest of the world.
Thanu, a continuation of this discussion is the fact that the U.S. has already stated that they want to withdraw from the Paris Climate Agreement. So what presence do they have in Bonn? Why are they attending at all?
Yeah, absolutely. So just to clarify, yes, the Trump administration has an intention to withdraw from the Paris Climate Agreement. They made that statement back in early June. However, they will not be able to do that until 2020. And so there are individuals from the U.S. State Department who are here, who are still part of talks around the implementation of the Paris Climate Agreement. Having said that, no, the Trump administration does not have a large delegation here. In fact, next week, the White House is hosting, the one event that they're hosting is one where they're going to speak towards basically the need for fossil fuels, nuclear and coal as a mitigation tactic for climate change, which we find absolutely disrespectful, absolutely absurd that they are conducting this panel on Monday here at the COP.
Katia, let me go to you this time. You're from Puerto Rico. That has just gone through a huge devastation as a result of Hurricane Maria. Tell us about the reasons why you're in Bonn, what messages you are carrying on behalf of the Puerto Rican people.
Hi, so I'm from Organización Boricua de Agricultura Ecológica de Puerto Rico, and what we are is a network of farmers, agroecological farmers in the archipelago of Puerto Rico, working on sustainable sources of food and also just and fair access to land. And we are the representing chapter of La Vía Campesina in Puerto Rico. So why am I here? We have just been hit with the major reason why we need to stick to climate change agreements and even increase our ambitions, like Thanu said. We were hit by 2 major hurricanes in the Caribbean, and they leveled a lot of the smaller islands. The reason was at 40 feet, the water temperature was measured at 80 degrees. So this was just the massive energy that was given to these hurricanes to develop because of the increase in temperature due to climate change. So we need to stop this fossil fuel emissions now. We're no longer talking about transition or future changes. We're facing them now, and we're talking about how are we going to recover and adapt in the now regarding climate change and all the things and the challenges that it brings, including changing crop patterns, changing hydrological cycles. We just came out of a drought 2 years ago, and now we had this major hurricane level the island. We've been 2 months without power, without water, without communications. So the reason that I'm here is because without the United States, whether Trump wants to throw paper towels or not, we need every single country to move forward and make sure that we meet all of the requirements in terms of keeping parts per million below a certain level. And also we need to make sure that we have climate reparations for those of us that have had the least to contribute to climate change, but are bearing the brunt of the impacts of climate change. That's why I'm here.
And are people in Puerto Rico making the connection between Hurricane Maria and human-caused climate change, the message you're trying to carry out in Bonn?
That's a great question. Actually, a lot of people are indeed. It's kind of interesting because once you hit emergency mode, for example, a lot of people are relying now on gas-powered generators, and many people are trying to go solar. So people definitely see a clear connection, particularly because we just had the worst drought that we have had in over 100 years. We came out of it this year. So we came out of this heavy drought that harmed our agriculture and led to millions of dollars in loss, to go into a hurricane that has left us without any power and without basically a working economy. So definitely people are seeing it, but there's also a sense of impotence and frustration, because we can adapt all we want, but you cannot adapt to a Category 5 hurricane. You cannot adapt to increasing temperature levels. And at this point, the weather has been some of the hottest months that we have seen, and we're suffering that without any fans and without mosquito nets. The mosquitoes and the outbreaks of disease have had increases in the past few months. So there is a connection, but it's also a very difficult connection to make, because fine, I can make the connection, and then what do I do about it? It doesn't matter if I use the car or public transport, because that's not the impact that small archipelago or the entire Caribbean region is having. It's very small compared to the decisions that are being made here, for example.
Thanu, I understand that the U.S. delegation is broad, representative of many organizations, as well as cities and mayors, and of course, civil society organizations like yourselves, the 350.org, and many more. Now, I understand that, in the United States, we're just coming out of various extreme weather situations like the fires in California, as well as what happened in Puerto Rico. Several hurricanes had hit the United States, in Florida and elsewhere. Now, from what I understand, the delegation's very charged up. There's a sense of urgency. Describe that and what you hope to achieve with the delegations that are there from all over the world.
Yeah, I definitely think that there is a really strong sense of urgency, and people are listening to the U.S. People's Delegation. We had a very successful press conference, and we had a speak out yesterday where we had a diverse range of speakers from indigenous communities, communities of color, communities working in their towns in Colorado and California and Texas to really bring about local climate action. The U.S. People's Delegation basically is a coordinated effort by several organizations, 350.org, the It Takes Roots Coalition and Delegation, Sustain Us and Sunrise Movement, ICLEI, Sustainable Cities, our Children's Trust, and several others. And, we represent very different organizations and constituents that are really coming together to call on local elected officials to really put their money where their mouth is and not just pledge for climate action, but to really act on it. And so in terms of some of our demands as a People's Delegation, we're demanding a just and equitable transition to 100% renewable energy in all cities and states. We're going to be doing this at least from the 350 and through pushing resolutions that we're calling fossil-free resolutions. We're calling for U.S. elected officials to step up on meaningful climate action in bold ways, and we're calling for them to move beyond just saying that they're still in, but to actually implement things in cities and states. And we're calling for a halt to all new fossil fuel projects. And we're also demanding a stop on negotiating cap and trade, carbon offsets, and carbon pricing, because we don't want there to be false solutions to the climate crisis. And that's why it's so urgent that we move towards real solutions and we move towards transitioning to 100% renewables.
In terms of the U.S. People's Delegation on carbon trading, for example, is there a sense of consensus?
You know, I think that the People's Delegation is coming together from a range of perspectives, because we understand that this crisis is urgent. There are certain groups in this delegation that are working more on carbon pricing than others, but there is a consensus that we need real solutions.
Thanu, President Trump is pushing for a pro-coal, pro-fossil fuel agenda that he announced back in June, that he would like to pull the United States out of this agreement and promote something called pro-coal pool, clean coal, whatever it is that he wants to do. And I understand that there's being a panel held at the conference on this particular venture. How is that being received in Bonn, and what is your reaction to it?
I think it's being received with ridicule. The title of the panel is "The Role of Cleaner and More Efficient Fossil Fuels in Nuclear Power and Climate Mitigation." And some of the speakers include folks from Peabody Energy, which is a coal company, NuScale, which is a nuclear engineering firm, and Tellurian, which is a liquefied natural gas exporter. So basically, the Trump administration has sent people from the White House here to be cronies to the fossil fuel industry and to fossil fuel executives who are wrecking the planet. And so, you know, we are standing up against them. We, as the People's Delegation, are saying that this is not right. This is not even a solution. This is just preposterous and complete neglect of communities.
Organization is there who has been quite profound at organizing much of the demonstrations here in the United States, whether it was New York 2 years ago, or this, I guess, in January in Washington, D.C., one of the biggest climate demonstrations to take place in the U.S. Are you joining the protests that are taking place in Bonn, actually last weekend? And how was that attendance and the size of the demonstration? Describe it for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Last week's demonstration here in Bonn, there was 25,000 people on the street. It was really festive. The front of the march was led by 350's Pacific climate warriors, who have come from different regions of the Pacific Islands, who, once again, their islands are at the extreme front lines of the climate crisis, with their islands being 2 to 3 meters above sea level. And so they know, first and foremost, that the entire world is connected, that what the United States is doing, what the Trump administration does, is impacting the Pacific. What other countries, including Germany, does impacts other parts of the world. And so the mood, I think, was both festive but urgent, with an extreme emphasis to really stop the fossil fuel industry, and a real emphasis on solidarity from regions across the world. Now,
one final question to you, Thanu. This particular meeting is sponsored by the island of Fiji. However, or the islands of Fiji, I should say. However, the meeting is taking place in Bonn. Why is this? And then also take the opportunity to talk to us about why island nations are in such crisis, and the levels of how the levels of sea level rises are affecting the islands.
Yeah, as to why this conference is in Bonn, the UNFCCC has their offices here, and I think that they have a way in which they decide where the conferences are happening. I'm not sure that Fiji has the infrastructure and support in order to be able to host a conference as big as this in Fiji. But, the hosts of countries for the COP, it's not necessarily always in the country who is hosting the COP itself. And that's pretty pretty much across the board. In regards to your second question about island nations being impacted, I mean, the reality is that not just the Pacific Islands, but, near where I'm from, Sri Lanka, the Maldives is also in crisis. They are also at risk of sea level rise. And this is because these islands are close to sea level. Some are even below sea level. And they are really experiencing what's happening because of the melting ice caps. They're experiencing what's happening because of the fossil fuel industry helping to warm the planet. And the reality is, in order to really save these islands, we need to make some drastic, urgent, rapid changes. And that requires stopping fossil fuels. The more that we burn fossil fuels, the more that we continue to live in an economy that is based on the fossil fuel industry, we're putting entire people at risk. And in terms of my own personal interest, what is going to happen in the next 50 to 100 years is that you're going to see mass migrations of people from low-lying areas, including Bangladesh and island nations, because their countries are sinking. However, one of the things that really it has been inspiring me here at the COP is really the message of the 350 Pacific Climate Warriors. Their message is, we are not drowning, we are fighting. And I was with the Pacific Climate Warriors when we went and witnessed a devastatingly huge coal mine close to here in Bonn, to really make the connection between like what's happening in even a place like Germany is impacting a place like Fiji or the Marshall Islands or Tuvalu. And so the island nations are really here to really show the faces of those most impacted. And as someone who is also from an island, certainly that is in perhaps less crisis than Maldives, but will definitely see the impact of Maldivians moving to Sri Lanka. I think that this is something that we all need to really take into consideration, regardless of where we're from.
Thanu and Katia, I thank you both for joining us, and I hope you can join us again next week, because I understand the conference will be continuing into next week.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And thank you for joining us here on the Real News Network.